Welcome to another PyPhysicsSandbox tutorial video. In this one we're going to talk about rotary springs. And I'm starting off with a fair amount of code in here that is very similar to what we had for the observer functions screencast. So hopefully it looks familiar. But just in case, I want to talk through it. So I have this arm that is connected to a pivot. So if I do a draw on this, then you can see I've got my arm, pivot's right in the center. The arm can rotate around the pivot, but that's it. Then in the observer function, I add my observer function. In there, I check to see if the B key is pressed. If it is, I create a ball above that arm so that it will pivot around. And up till this point, it's exactly the same as we had in the observer functions one. We can create as many balls as we want, and they pivot it around. So what I want to do now is I want to add a rotary spring. Now you can think of a rotary spring as the same thing as a regular spring, but where a regular spring worked in the direction of gravity, a rotary spring works based on angular direction. So a rotary spring has two shapes. So I'm going to do the arm and the pivot. And it has a certain angle that it wants to keep those two shapes at the relative angle between them. And notice that my second shape is a pivot. So the pivot isn't moving. The pivot is always at 0 degrees. So it's only the arm that can rotate. So basically what I'm saying here is which degree do I want the arm to be at rest at. And I'm going to put in 0. So it's at rest when it is in its normal position. Then I give it, similar to the regular springs, I give it a stiffness and a damping. So I'm going to give it pretty high values for both of those. And then I'm going to run it. Now when I hit the ball down, notice how it rotated in the direction based up by the ball, but then it got pulled back. That pulling back is the rotary spring trying to pull it back to 0 degrees. And it eventually gets there. And then I can do another one. So I can keep winding it up, but eventually it's going to unwind and then go back to that 0 degrees. So it's exactly like if you've twisted a spring as opposed to pulling on the spring. So that's what a rotary spring is. You can attach it to two shapes and specify the amount of twist that you want the spring to have, and then the spring will always try to have that amount of twist. So one of the things that you can do with a rotary spring is something like a pinball lever. So the rotary spring can keep the pinball lever at a particular angle, but then when you give an upward force on it, it goes up and then gets pulled back down. So think about interesting ways that you could use rotary springs.